Ben Wheeler stared at his phone screen, heart racing as he reread Emily's last message, her words swirling in his mind, "I can't wait to see you tonight." The sentence hung in the air, echoing in his thoughts. He had been staring at it for far too long now, watching the blinking cursor, wondering if there was something more behind her words that he couldn't see. Ben was a 32-year-old office worker, whose life had taken on the dull rhythms of routine. He spent his days in a cubicle, clicking through spreadsheets and answering emails. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. His evenings followed a similar pattern, cooking for one, watching whatever was on TV, and trying to make sense of his lackluster love life. Past relationships had burned him, some left him heartbroken, others had simply faded into the background of his life. Now, he kept his distance, unwilling to risk his peace of mind for another potential disappointment. When Emily had messaged him on the dating app, he had almost ignored it. Another woman, another chat that would lead nowhere. But there was something about her profile that caught his eye, her smile, the way her eyes seemed to twinkle in every photo. So, he responded, and what followed was a series of exchanges that felt effortless. Their conversations flowed naturally, like they'd known each other for years. She was witty, charming, and, above all, attentive. He felt seen, heard, something that had been missing for so long. Yet, despite the ease of their conversations, something about Emily felt too perfect. Too eager. She responded quickly to every message, shared personal details about herself, but when it came to meeting in person, she always had an excuse. She was too busy. She had to work late. She didn't want to meet in a crowded place. Ben's curiosity deepened, his skepticism growing with each delay. She was beautiful, engaging, and seemed to genuinely like him, but something in his gut told him it was all too good to be true. He tried to ignore it, brushing off his doubts. After all, Emily had said all the right things, and he'd be lying if he said he didn't want to meet her. Eventually, he pushed through his reservations. He was tired of playing it safe, tired of waiting. So, he took the plunge, pushing to finally meet in person. The night of their first date arrived. Ben arrived early, standing nervously outside the cafe, checking his watch every few minutes. When she walked in, it was like the world stopped for a moment. She was even more stunning in person, her red dress hugged her figure just right, and the way she smiled made his stomach flip. They embraced like old friends, and he felt his earlier doubts begin to melt away. They sat, talked, laughed, the conversation flowing easily. For the first time in a long while, Ben felt that spark. She was everything he had hoped for, and more. But as the evening wore on, something shifted. It wasn't immediately noticeable, but by the end of the night, Ben could tell. Emily was no longer her usual self. Her easy laughter faded into an uncomfortable silence. She glanced at her phone more than once, as though something was distracting her. When he paid for their meal, she seemed distant, almost guarded. At the door, she gave him a quick hug and mentioned that she needed to go, an early day at work, she said, her voice tight. He tried to coax her into staying a little longer, but she insisted. The ride home felt off. The energy between them had shifted, and Ben couldn't pinpoint why. What had happened? They had clicked so well before the date. He tried to shake the unease that settled in his chest. He texted her as soon as he got back to his apartment, hoping she'd reply quickly. But the minutes ticked by, then hours, and still nothing. His phone remained silent. Days passed. Ben sent a couple more messages, but all were left unanswered. He told himself it was probably nothing. Maybe she had been busy or wasn't interested. But the doubt crept in again. It gnawed at him, that familiar feeling of being left behind, like he had somehow messed up. He couldn't let it go. The silence stretched on for days. Each time he checked his phone, hoping to see a reply from Emily, his stomach sank. The uncertainty began to suffocate him. Something wasn't right. He knew it. But what was it? Why had she disappeared without a word? In his frustration, Ben decided to take control. He needed answers, needed closure. He replayed the night over and over in his mind, scrutinizing every detail. The way she had smiled. The way her eyes had shifted when he mentioned a future date. Had he said something wrong? He had to find out what happened. Ben retraced his steps from the night of the date. He visited the cafe again, asked the staff if they had seen anything unusual, but got nothing. He drove by her apartment, hoping for some sign, some clue, but the windows were dark, empty. His mind raced, bouncing between panic and disbelief. What was he missing? It was then that he found it, a message buried deep in his inbox from a few weeks earlier. It was from Emily, an old conversation he had almost forgotten about. She had written something that now seemed ominous. Sometimes, the past catches up to me. It's like I'm running from it, but it's always right there, watching me. He read the message again, his breath catching in his throat. What was she running from? The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He couldn't ignore it anymore. There was something off about her. Something dark. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen, feeling the weight of his own thoughts pressing down on him. Suddenly, his phone rang. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. He answered, his voice shaky. Ben Wheeler. A stern voice on the other end. Yes, who is this? He felt the blood drain from his face. This is Detective Harris. We need to talk about Emily. His stomach dropped. Emily? What's going on? Ben's voice cracked. Emily has gone missing. We believe she was last seen leaving your date the other night. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. What? No, what do you mean? I haven't heard from her since. We have evidence suggesting you might know more than you're letting on, Mr. Wheeler. We need you to come in for questioning. Ben froze, the room spinning around him. The truth of the situation slammed into him like a freight train. The cops were accusing him. Of course, they were. His name was on her texts. He had been the last person to see her. His mind raced, but the only thought that cut through the chaos was the chilling realization: this was real. Emily was missing. And somehow, he was the prime suspect. Ben didn't even know how to respond. His life, his quiet, uneventful life, was crumbling. His past relationships had hurt him, sure, but this was something else entirely. He wasn't prepared for this. The officer's voice came through again, shaking him from his thoughts. We'll be expecting you at the station. Don't make us come get you. The line went dead, leaving him with a sickening sense of dread. Ben dropped the phone onto his desk and ran a hand through his hair. His life was falling apart. He had no idea what had happened to Emily or why he was being dragged into it. But one thing was clear: this wasn't just a bad date gone wrong. Something far darker was unfolding, and he was at the center of it. As he stood up, his knees weak, he realized one thing: his life would never be the same again. The tension in Ben's life had gone from uncomfortable to unbearable. The police were tightening their grip around him, slowly but surely. Every time he spoke with them, every time he tried to explain himself, their questions felt more like accusations. His alibi from the night of the date had been scrutinized, analyzed, and poked at until the cracks in his story were visible. His every word was met with skepticism. They didn't believe him, not entirely. It was clear now that they were convinced he knew more about Emily's disappearance than he was letting on. Each day that passed felt like a weight pressing on his chest. Ben could feel the walls closing in around him. The police weren't just investigating, they were scrutinizing his life in a way he hadn't experienced before. His phone was tapped. His emails were reviewed. They had even questioned his co-workers, trying to uncover some dark secret about his personal life that could link him to Emily's disappearance. He had no idea how they were piecing this together, but each step they took made him feel smaller, more desperate. The worst part was that the more they dug, the more he realized he wasn't just a witness anymore. He was a suspect. And the evidence against him was piling up. There were traces of Emily's belongings found at his apartment, small things, an earring, a stray hair, but they were enough to make the police suspicious. His messages to her, the timing of their dates, all seemed to line up in a way that cast doubt on his innocence. The whole thing felt like a nightmare, and the longer he stayed in the investigation, the more impossible it seemed to escape. He couldn't focus at work anymore. Every time he sat at his desk, trying to force his brain into some semblance of productivity, his mind drifted back to Emily. What had happened to her? Why had she disappeared? And why, despite his best efforts, did he feel more and more like the one who was being framed for it? Ben couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, something was off about the entire situation. He had to figure it out, but the pressure was mounting. He couldn't help but make mistakes. His mind was clouded with paranoia, and it was starting to take its toll. Ben found himself making impulsive decisions that he wouldn't have normally made. He started talking to people he barely knew, friends of friends, co-workers who barely spoke to him before. Everyone seemed to have something to say, but nothing concrete, nothing that would lead him to the truth. He found himself diving deeper into the investigation, trying to uncover some hidden clue that might clear his name. But the deeper he went, the more tangled the web became. He talked to Emily's friends, but they were as clueless as he was. He even contacted some of her exes, people she had mentioned in passing, but they were either too terrified to talk or completely unhelpful. The paranoia started to eat at him. He felt like the police were manipulating him, like they were trying to frame him for something he hadn't done. The evidence against him seemed too neat, too clean. They were building a case, but the foundation felt shaky, like someone was pulling strings in the background. But who? And why? He couldn't figure it out, and the longer it went on, the more his grip on reality slipped. The first real breakthrough came when he stumbled across something strange, something Emily had left behind in her apartment. Ben had returned to her place, desperate for answers, but as he rifled through her belongings, he found something unexpected. Beneath a stack of old books in a drawer was a series of journals, hidden away like a secret. The journals were filled with scribbled notes, cryptic messages, and strange references to other men she had dated before. His heart pounded as he flipped through the pages, noting the names of men he didn't recognize. The entries were dated, and they told a story, one that didn't fit the picture Emily had painted for him. These men, like Ben, had been lured in by her charm, only to fade away without explanation. There were strange references to meetings, to dates, and then silence. It was like a pattern. And it was terrifying. Ben had been just another pawn in Emily's game. But the more he read, the more his stomach twisted. The final journal entry sent a chill down his spine. I can't let him get too close. I'll have to make him disappear, like the others. He'll be another ghost. Ben slammed the journal shut, his hands trembling. What had he gotten himself into? He had to get this information to the police. It was the lead he needed, the one thing that could change everything. But when he arrived at the police station, things took a strange turn. The officers were skeptical. They dismissed the journals as unimportant, just ramblings of a woman who had gone off the deep end. They didn't want to hear about the men she'd dated, the connections he had uncovered. They were focused on one thing, proving that he was the one responsible for her disappearance. Every scrap of evidence he brought to them was met with resistance. They had already made up their minds. His frustration boiled over. This isn't just about me. You have to understand. Emily wasn't who she said she was. She had a pattern. She's done this before. But Detective Harris, the lead investigator, shook his head, his face a mask of indifference. We're not here to listen to your theories, Mr. Wheeler. We're here to find Emily. Now, unless you have more concrete evidence, you're wasting our time. Ben's anger flared, but he couldn't back down. He had to prove that he wasn't the one at fault here. He had to find Emily. But every door he opened only seemed to close tighter. His next lead came unexpectedly, a phone call from one of Emily's former dates, a man who had contacted him out of the blue. Ben had met him a few days earlier, and the man had been tight-lipped, offering little in terms of information. But now, he sounded nervous, his voice shaky on the other end of the line. She's not who you think she is, man. She's dangerous, the man said, his voice barely audible. I don't know how to explain it, but she's been playing us all along. Ben's heart raced as he pressed for more information. But before the man could say anything else, the line went dead. Ben's suspicion grew. This was the break he needed, the confirmation that Emily had been using men like pawns in some sick game. He had to confront this man, get the information he needed, and finally uncover the truth. But when he met the man in person, things took a violent turn. The confrontation quickly escalated, words becoming shoves, shoves turning into punches. Ben's frustration reached its peak, and he found himself in a heated struggle. The man's face twisted with fear as he backed away, shouting something about not wanting to get involved. In the scuffle, Ben's hand brushed against something sharp, something metallic. It was a knife. They both froze. Ben's heart raced as he realized what was happening. This was no accident. The man was hiding something, something dangerous. But just as he was about to press the man for more information, the police arrived, sirens blaring. They broke up the altercation, but the damage was done. Ben had lost the lead, and now he had even more explaining to do. He was being dragged into the investigation deeper than ever before, and the noose around his neck was tightening. As he left the scene, a sinking feeling settled in his gut. He was no closer to finding Emily, and yet everything pointed back to him. The twists were piling up, but every answer only led to more questions. The pattern was there, but no one was listening. Not the police. Not the people he had tried to warn. The road ahead seemed darker, the pressure heavier. And Ben had no idea how to escape. Ben's life had spiraled beyond his control, and now, the clock was ticking. Each hour felt heavier, each minute longer. He was running out of time. The pressure weighed on him like a boulder lodged in his chest. With every passing second, his situation worsened. What once felt like a tangled web of confusion now felt like an inevitable trap closing in on him. Every time he thought he was getting closer to finding the truth, he was pushed further back into uncertainty. The more he uncovered about Emily, the more tangled the web became. Each piece of evidence led to another layer of deception. And just when he thought he had a break, the police would throw more questions at him, more doubts about his innocence. The walls seemed to be closing in from all sides. Ben couldn't breathe. He had to find her. He had to prove his innocence. But where was she? The pressure was unbearable. He spent sleepless nights poring over the messages Emily had sent him, retracing their conversations, looking for something, anything, that might reveal where she had gone. But the more he dug, the more the situation seemed to blur. It was as though Emily had anticipated every move he would make. The information he found seemed like a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. Then, out of nowhere, he received a message. It was from Emily. The words were cryptic, vague. It's not what you think. I'm still out there. You have to trust me. There's a place you need to go. The truth is waiting. Ben stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. His heart skipped a beat. Was this real? Was she still alive? The message gave him a glimmer of hope, a fragile thread he could cling to. He had to follow it. There was no other choice. The location she mentioned was an old warehouse in a forgotten part of the city, an industrial area Ben had passed by many times but never stopped to explore. She had mentioned it once during their conversations, but he'd written it off as insignificant. Now, the place felt like the key to everything. He wasn't sure what he would find, but it was the only lead he had left. He drove there without a second thought. His mind raced, and his hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he made his way through the dimly lit streets. The city felt eerily quiet, almost too quiet, as though it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. When he reached the warehouse, it was as desolate as he remembered, large, rusting doors, cracked windows, and a sense of decay that hung in the air. Ben parked his car a few blocks away, making sure he wasn't seen, then walked cautiously toward the building. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. This was it, the place Emily had led him to. But what would he find here? He approached the door, his breath shallow, and pushed it open. The hinges creaked, the sound echoing in the vast emptiness inside. He stepped into the warehouse, every step cautious, every sound amplified. As he ventured deeper into the building, Ben's eyes darted around, searching for any sign of Emily. The air was thick with dust, and the floor was littered with debris. The place felt abandoned, yet something about it seemed wrong. He felt as though he were being watched, but when he turned, there was nothing. A noise broke the silence, a faint sound, almost like a whisper. Ben froze. His pulse quickened. He turned toward the sound, but it was too late. Before he could react, a figure emerged from the shadows, blocking his path. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face partially obscured by the low light. Ben tensed, his instincts screaming that this was no coincidence. The man was too calm, too prepared, and Ben didn't like the look in his eyes. "You shouldn't have come here," the man said, his voice low and dangerous. Ben didn't move, his mind racing. "Where is she? What have you done to Emily?" The man smirked, stepping closer. "She's gone. She's been playing you the whole time." Ben's stomach churned as the words hit him like a punch. "What are you talking about?" The man's eyes glinted with amusement. "Emily set you up. You were never her victim, Wheeler. You were just another pawn in her game." Ben's mind reeled. The pieces clicked into place. Emily had orchestrated this. She had used him. He was nothing more than an alibi, a distraction. He had been pulled into her scheme, and now he was trapped. Before Ben could respond, the man lunged, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against a metal pillar. The air rushed out of his lungs as pain shot through his chest. He struggled, trying to break free, but the man's grip was ironclad. "You think she cares about you?" the man hissed. "She's using you to cover her tracks. All of this, the missing men, the lies, it's all part of her plan." Ben's vision blurred from the impact, but he refused to give up. He managed to twist his body and bring his knee up into the man's abdomen, forcing him to loosen his grip. With one swift motion, Ben pushed the man off him and staggered back, gasping for breath. The man glared at him, eyes burning with rage. "You think you can stop her? You're just like the others. She'll make you disappear, too." With no time to lose, Ben bolted for the door, but before he could reach it, the man lunged again. A struggle ensued, chaotic and brutal. Ben fought for his life, but the man was stronger. The final blow came when Ben managed to land a lucky punch, sending the man crashing to the ground. Ben didn't wait to see if he would get up. He ran out of the warehouse, heart pounding, every step filled with panic. He barely made it to his car. Once inside, Ben slammed the door, gasping for air. His hands shook as he fumbled for his phone. He needed to call the police, but his mind raced with what he had just learned. Emily had orchestrated the entire situation, every move, every lie, every detail. The pieces of her twisted game were falling into place. He had been played, but the truth was worse than he could have imagined. Ben's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden message on his phone. The text was from Emily. "You're not going to get away with this. You're a part of my plan now. I made you, and I'll break you." His breath caught in his throat. Emily wasn't just a victim in all of this. She had orchestrated the entire situation. She had used him, manipulated him, and now she was watching him break. The realization hit Ben with full force. He was never the victim. He was a pawn in Emily's game, and the truth was darker than he could have imagined. The police would soon find the new evidence, messages Emily had sent to herself, implicating Ben in her disappearance. The entire story, the entire narrative, was a lie. And Ben had been living it. He had no idea what to do next, no idea how to escape from this nightmare. But one thing was clear, Emily had won. And now, he was trapped. Ben had hit rock bottom. Every part of his life had been shattered by Emily's web of lies. He was a suspect in her disappearance, accused of crimes he didn't commit, his reputation destroyed by the public and the media. But that all changed when Ben uncovered the final piece of the puzzle. The truth was right in front of him, staring him down. He had the evidence, the proof that Emily had manipulated him and used him as a pawn in her twisted game. Now, it was time to take matters into his own hands. He wasn't going to wait around any longer for the police or the authorities to solve this. He was done being a passive player in this nightmare. With a newfound resolve, Ben made a bold decision. He would expose everything. He organized a press conference. It wasn't something he ever thought he would do, but the weight of the truth was too heavy to carry alone. He had the evidence, and it was time for the world to see it. He couldn't keep hiding. The press conference was held in a downtown hotel, with cameras and reporters from all over the city gathering in the room. Ben stood at the podium, his heart racing, his palms sweaty. This was it. His moment to speak the truth, to clear his name, to show everyone who the real villain in this story was. He took a deep breath and began. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. I stand before you today to clear my name. For weeks, I have been accused of a crime I didn't commit. I've been vilified, questioned, and accused of something unimaginable. But the truth is, I was the victim in all of this." The room fell silent as Ben continued, laying out everything he had uncovered, Emily's manipulative tactics, the pattern of deceit she had used to lure men in, and how she had framed him for her own disappearance. He presented the evidence, messages between him and Emily, the journals he had found, and the new revelations that proved she had orchestrated everything. It was all there. The audience listened intently, the weight of the truth sinking in. But then, the twist came. Ben dropped the bombshell. "And here's something I only recently learned, the head of the police department, the man who was supposed to be investigating Emily's disappearance, is in a relationship with her." That's right. The very man who was supposed to protect and serve was part of the conspiracy. Emily had been controlling the police the entire time. The room erupted in shock. The reporters were stunned. It was a scandal on a scale no one had expected. The head of the police department, a man who had been overseeing the investigation, was implicated as being involved with Emily. The public was horrified. It was no longer just about a missing woman, it was about corruption, manipulation, and betrayal at the highest levels. The press conference went viral. Social media was flooded with reactions, and the story spread like wildfire. People who had once believed Ben was guilty were now questioning everything. The public opinion shifted. He was no longer the villain, the suspect. He was the victim, someone who had been manipulated by a woman who had expertly played him and the system. Ben's name was cleared, but the victory felt bittersweet. Emily was still nowhere to be found, her whereabouts unknown, slipping through the cracks just like she always did. The media coverage turned Ben into a symbol, a cautionary tale about the dangers of online manipulation and how easily someone could be drawn into a false narrative. His story became an example of the fragility of trust, the fine line between truth and deception. Ben had been a victim, but now he was a symbol of the dangers lurking behind the screens of the digital world. The weeks following the press conference were a blur for Ben. He stayed out of the public eye, avoiding media attention as much as possible. The storm had passed, but the aftermath lingered. He spent time reflecting on everything that had happened, trying to make sense of the mess that Emily had created. And in those quiet moments, when the weight of the world seemed too much to bear, Ben realized something important: he couldn't let this define him. As much as the past had torn him apart, he knew he had to rebuild. He had to start fresh. He had to find a new direction in his life, one that didn't revolve around Emily or the chaos she had brought. And then, just as he was starting to find peace, his phone buzzed again. It was a message from an unknown number. Ben's heart sank as he read the text. "You think it's over, don't you? I'm still out there, Ben. And I'm watching. You'll never truly be free of me." The message hit him like a slap to the face. The truth was clear now: this was never truly over. Emily was still out there, somewhere, waiting for her next move. The game wasn't finished. But for now, Ben sighed, a mixture of exhaustion and determination in his chest. He had survived her game once. And he'd survive it again. He muttered to himself, a rueful smile tugging at his lips, "I guess I should have swiped left."